The shot rang out across the Montana prairie, shattering the stillness of the summer evening and changing Beatrice Grayson's life forever. The stagecoach robbery wasn't supposed to end this way, with her brother dead, her leg mangled by a bullet, and her future as uncertain as the distant horizon. As she lay in the dust of the trail, blood soaking through her petticoats, the doctor's words would echo in her mind for months to come. She'll never walk right again, never be whole again. It was 1876, a year of both celebration and sorrow for a nation just beginning to heal from the wounds of civil war. Beatrice had been traveling west to start anew after losing her parents to consumption, pinning her hopes on the small inheritance and her brother's dreams of ranching in the Montana Territory. Now, at 22, she found herself alone, confined to a boarding house room in the dusty town of Silver Creek, with nothing but painful memories and an uncertain future. "Miss Grayson, you have a visitor," Mrs. Holloway, the boarding house owner, announced one crisp October morning, 3 months after the attack. Beatrice looked up from her needlework, her fingers stiff from the morning chill. "I'm not receiving visitors," she replied, her voice hollow. Since the accident, she'd withdrawn from the world, ashamed of her halting gait and the wooden cane that now served as her unwelcome companion. "It's Mr. Jameson from the Triple J Ranch," Mrs. Holloway persisted. "Says he's got a proposition for you." Beatrice sighed, smoothing her skirts over her damaged leg. "Very well. Send him up." The floorboards creaked beneath heavy boots before a tall shadow fell across her doorway. Daniel Jameson stood there, hat in hand, his frame nearly filling the entrance. Beatrice had seen him in town, occasionally a man of few words, but respected by all for his fair dealings and hard work. His ranch, 10 miles outside of Silver Creek, was said to be one of the most prosperous in the territory. "Miss Grayson," he nodded, his deep voice resonating in the small room. "Hope I'm not disturbing you." "What can I do for you, Mr. Jameson?" Beatrice asked, not bothering with pleasantries. Since the accident, she had little patience for social niceties. Daniel shifted, uncomfortable in the dainty surroundings of her room. His sun-weathered face and calloused hands spoke of a life lived outdoors, a stark contrast to the lace curtains and delicate furnishings. "I understand you're a schoolteacher by training," he said, getting straight to the point. Beatrice nodded. "I was, before. I have a sister, Emma. She's 15 and smart as a whip, but with Ma gone these past 5 years and me running the ranch, she hasn't had proper schooling. I've been teaching her what I can, but..." He trailed off, twisting his hat in his hands. "She deserves better." "And you think I can help?" Beatrice asked, her brow furrowing. "I'm offering you a position as her tutor, room and board at the ranch plus wages." His blue eyes met hers directly. "And maybe some peace and quiet to heal." Beatrice laughed bitterly. "Mr. Jameson, I appreciate the offer, but as you can see," she gestured toward her cane, "I'm not exactly in a position to be of service to anyone." Daniel's expression didn't change. "Your leg might be injured, Miss Grayson, but your mind isn't. Emma needs knowledge, not someone to race her across the fields." "The doctor said I'll never be whole again," she said, the words still raw and painful. Daniel Jameson's gaze never wavered. "With all due respect to the doctors, Miss Grayson, you don't have to be whole to be valuable. We're all missing pieces out here in the territory. It's what you do with what remains that matters." His words hung in the air between them, challenging the narrative she'd been telling herself since the attack. For the first time in months, Beatrice felt something stir within her, not hope exactly, but perhaps its distant cousin. "When would you need me to start?" she asked finally. "I've got the wagon outside. We can gather your things today if you're willing." Beatrice looked around the small room that had become her prison. What did she have to lose? "Give me an hour to pack my belongings," she said. The journey to the Triple J Ranch was jarring, every bump in the road sending shocks of pain through Beatrice's injured leg. She gritted her teeth, determined not to show weakness, though Daniel Jameson slowed the wagon considerably whenever the path grew rough. "It's not much farther now," he said, breaking a long silence, "just over that ridge." As they crested the hill, Beatrice's breath caught. Below them stretched a valley of surprising beauty, a ribbon of river cutting through golden grasslands, cottonwoods blazing yellow in their autumn finery, and nestled against the backdrop of distant mountains, a substantial log house with a wrap-around porch and several outbuildings. "This is all yours?" she asked, unable to hide her surprise. Daniel nodded. "My father staked his claim here 20 years ago. I took over when he passed in 68. "It's beautiful," Beatrice admitted. "It's home," he said simply, then clicked to the horses to continue down the slope. As they approached the house, a slender girl with honey-colored braids ran out onto the porch, waving enthusiastically. Daniel's stoic expression softened into something that resembled a smile. "That's Emma," he said. "Been excited about your arrival since yesterday." The wagon pulled to a stop, and before Daniel could climb down to assist her, the girl bounded over. "You must be Miss Grayson. I'm Emma Jameson. Daniel says you're going to teach me everything about literature and history and mathematics. Is it true you taught at a real school back east? What books did you bring? Do you know Latin?" "I've been trying to learn from Father's old primer, but the pronunciation is terribly confusing." "Emma," Daniel cut in, "let Miss Grayson catch her breath before you start in with the questions." Beatrice couldn't help but smile at the girl's enthusiasm. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Emma, and yes, I did teach at a school in Pennsylvania, though not for very long." Daniel came around to her side of the wagon. "Let me help you down." Beatrice stiffened. This was the moment she dreaded, the awkward, humiliating process of maneuvering her damaged body while others watched. But Daniel's strong hands were at her waist before she could protest, lifting her as if she weighed nothing at all and setting her gently on the ground. He handed her the cane without comment, then turned to retrieve her trunk. "Mrs. Peterson's got supper nearly ready," Emma chattered, falling into step beside Beatrice, naturally slowing her pace to match her new teacher's. "She comes in 3 times a week to cook and help with the washing. The rest of the time it's just me and Daniel and the ranch hands, though they stay in the bunkhouse mostly. Your room is next to mine, with a view of the mountains. Daniel had me put fresh linens on the bed and wildflowers on the dresser." "Do you like wildflowers, Miss Grayson?" "I do," Beatrice said, warming to the girl's open nature. "And please, call me Beatrice." The house was surprisingly comfortable inside, simple but clean, with solid furniture and colorful quilts that softened the rustic interior. Beatrice's room was larger than she expected, with a brass bed, a small writing desk by the window, and a rocking chair near the stone fireplace. "I hope it will suit," Daniel said, setting her trunk at the foot of the bed. "It's more than suitable," Beatrice assured him. "Thank you. Supper's in an hour. Emma will show you where to freshen up." With a nod, he left, his boots echoing down the hallway. True to his word, supper was ready an hour later, a hearty beef stew, fresh-baked bread, and apple pie for dessert. Mrs. Peterson, A plump, friendly woman in her 50s fussed over Beatrice, insisting she take seconds of everything. "You're too thin, dear," she clucked, ladling more stew into Beatrice's bowl despite her protests. "A good Montana winter will put some meat on those bones." The meal was the most pleasant Beatrice had experienced in months. Emma's questions about life back east and books she had read kept the conversation flowing, while Daniel, though quiet, seemed to enjoy listening to them talk. It was only when Mrs. Peterson had gone and Emma had been sent to bed that Daniel broached more serious matters. "I should tell you about Emma's schooling so far," he said, pouring them each a small measure of whiskey. When Beatrice raised an eyebrow, he smiled slightly. "Medicine," he explained, "for the leg. The nights get cold here." Beatrice accepted the glass, surprised by his perceptiveness. "Tell me about Emma's education." "Our mother taught us both to read and write. She was educated, came from a good Boston family before she married Pa. After she died, I did what I could, but..." He shrugged. "Emma deserves more than what I can give her." "What are your expectations?" Beatrice asked, sipping the whiskey and feeling its warmth spread through her chest. "I want her to have choices," Daniel said. "To be able to go back east for finishing school if she wants, or to stay here and run this ranch if that's her decision. Either way, she needs to know more than I can teach her." Beatrice nodded. "I'll need books, supplies. Already ordered them from Helena. Should arrive within the week." He leaned forward. "There's something else you should know. Emma was thrown from a horse when she was 12. She hasn't ridden since." "I don't see how that relates to her education," Beatrice said, puzzled. "It relates to her spirit," Daniel replied. "She used to be fearless. Now she's afraid of more than just horses. She's afraid to try things, afraid to fail." His eyes met Beatrice's. "I'm hoping you might help her with more than just book learning." "Because I'm broken too?" Beatrice asked sharply. Daniel didn't flinch. "Because you survived something terrible and you're still here, still fighting. Emma needs to see that kind of courage." Beatrice set down her glass. "You presume a great deal about me, Mr. Jameson." "Maybe so," he conceded. "But I've seen the look in your eyes, Miss Grayson. It's the same one I had after Shiloh. The one that says the world's dealt you a bad hand, but you're still holding the cards." Beatrice was silent for a long moment, studying this cowboy who spoke with such unexpected insight. "I'll do my best with Emma's education," she finally said. "The rest, we'll have to see." Daniel nodded. "Fair enough." He stood, towering in the lamplight. "Breakfast is at sunrise. Don't worry about getting to the table. I'll have a tray sent to your room until you're comfortable with the house." After he left, Beatrice remained by the fire, contemplating the strange turn her life had taken. For the first time since the attack, she was thinking about someone other than herself. It was a small shift, but significant, like the first hint of thaw after a long, hard winter. The following weeks established a rhythm to Beatrice's new life at the Triple J. Mornings were devoted to Emma's lessons, literature, mathematics, history, and the rudiments of Latin. The girl was as bright as Daniel had claimed, soaking up knowledge with an eagerness that reminded Beatrice why she had loved teaching in the first place. Afternoons, while Emma helped with chores around the ranch, Beatrice would rest her leg and prepare the next day's lessons. She began taking short walks, using her cane to navigate the yard, then gradually venturing farther to a small pond where cattails rustled in the breeze and red-winged blackbirds called from the reeds. Daniel was often absent during the day, overseeing the ranch operations, but he joined them for supper each evening, listening intently as Emma shared what she had learned. Though still reserved, he began to reveal more of himself through small gestures, leaving a wildflower bouquet on the breakfast table, building a special step at the back door to make it easier for Beatrice to navigate, or bringing her books from his modest library when the weather kept her indoors. As October gave way to November, the first snow dusted the mountains and the air turned sharp with the promise of winter. Beatrice found her leg aching more in the cold, but she refused to let it confine her to the house. One afternoon, bundled against the chill, she made her way to the corral where Daniel was working with a young horse. She watched from the fence as he moved with the animal, his movements confident but gentle. There was a quiet communication between man and horse that fascinated her, a language of pressure and release, of mutual respect rather than dominance. "You're good with him," she called when Daniel noticed her presence. He approached the fence, patting the horse's neck before letting it trot away. "He's a good horse, just needs to learn to trust." "Is that why Emma won't ride? Lack of trust?" Daniel rested his arms on the top rail, his breath clouding in the cold air. "Partly. The fall was bad, broke her arm in 2 places, but it's more than that. She loved that horse, raised him from a colt. He spooked at a rattlesnake, threw her, then stepped on her trying to get away. 2 weeks later, he colicked and died. She blames herself. For the horse dying? For all of it. For not being a better rider, for not saving him. She was 12 and thought she could control everything if she just tried hard enough. His eyes met Beatrice's. Some lessons come harder than others. "And what lesson did you learn at Shiloh?" Beatrice asked, remembering his earlier mention of the battle. Daniel was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "That living takes more courage than dying," he finally said. "And that sometimes the wounds that hurt the most are the ones nobody can see." The raw honesty in his voice stirred something in Beatrice. For the first time, she saw past the strong, capable rancher to the man beneath, one who carried his own scars, who understood suffering in a way few others might. "I was engaged before the accident," she found herself saying. "His name was Thomas. When he saw what happened to my leg, he said he couldn't bear to watch me suffer, that it would be kinder to release me from our commitment." She laughed bitterly. "He meant kinder to him, of course." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Sounds like you had a lucky escape from a man with no backbone." "Perhaps," Beatrice conceded, "but it still hurts to be found wanting." "There's nothing wanting about you, Miss Grayson," Daniel said quietly, his eyes never leaving hers. Any man worth his salt would see that. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with something neither was ready to name. It was Beatrice who broke the moment, suddenly conscious of the cold seeping through her clothes. "I should get back to the house. Emma's Latin exercises won't grade themselves." Daniel nodded. "I'll walk you." "That's not necessary. The ground's getting icy. Humor me." He offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, Beatrice took it. They walked in companionable silence, his solid presence making the journey easier than she'd like to admit. At the porch steps, he surprised her by lifting her easily over the icy patches, setting her down carefully on the dry boards of the porch. "Thank you," she said, flustered by the casual strength of him, the lingering warmth where his hands had been. "My pleasure, Miss Grayson." As November deepened, snow blanketed the valley, transforming the ranch into a world of pristine white. Confined more often to the house by the weather, Beatrice found herself drawn into the intimate rhythms of the Jamesons' life. She helped Emma bake cookies from their mother's recipe, learned to knit by the fire during the long evenings, and discovered that Daniel had a surprisingly rich voice when Emma coaxed him into singing old ballads on Sunday nights. It was during one such evening, with the wind howling outside and the fire crackling in the hearth, that Emma asked the question Beatrice had been dreading. "Will you tell us about the accident, Beatrice? Daniel says I shouldn't ask, but—" "Emma," Daniel warned from his chair by the fire. "It's all right," Beatrice said, setting aside her knitting. "You've both been kind enough to take me in. You deserve to know." She took a steadying breath. "My brother Robert and I were traveling west by stagecoach. Our parents had died, and Robert had dreams of starting a ranch, much like this one. We had our inheritance money with us, not a fortune, but enough to buy land and cattle to start with. The memory of that day came rushing back, the heat, the dust, the sudden shouts as masked riders surrounded the coach. There were 4 of them. They demanded valuables, and most passengers complied. But one man tried to hide a gold watch. When the robbers discovered it, they became violent." She swallowed hard. Robert stood up, tried to intervene. One of the robbers shot him point blank. Emma gasped. Daniel's face remained impassive, but his eyes never left Beatrice's face. "I screamed and lunged at the man who shot my brother. Another robber fired, and the bullet hit my leg. They took everything, our money, our future, and left me bleeding beside my dead brother." "How did you survive?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A cavalry patrol heard the shots. They found me an hour later, brought me to Silver Creek. The doctor there saved my life, but he couldn't save my leg from permanent damage." Beatrice touched her thigh unconsciously. The bullet shattered the bone. It healed, but not properly. "Did they catch the men who did it?" Daniel asked, his voice low and controlled. Beatrice shook her head. "The marshal tried, but the trail went cold. They're probably in Canada by now, or dead in some other robbery gone wrong." Emma moved to sit beside Beatrice on the sofa, taking her hand. "I'm sorry about your brother. And your leg." "So am I," Beatrice said softly. "But I'm beginning to think that perhaps there can be life after such losses." Her eyes met Daniel's across the room, and the look that passed between them held more than words could express. Later, when Emma had gone to bed, Daniel brought Beatrice a cup of tea as she sat by the dying fire. "Thank you for sharing your story," he said. "I know it wasn't easy." "Oddly enough, it was easier than I expected," Beatrice admitted. "There's something about this place that makes burdens feel lighter." Daniel sat in the chair opposite her, the firelight casting shadows across his strong features. "I felt the same way when I came back from the war. Couldn't sleep without nightmares, couldn't stand loud noises. But the land, it has a way of healing a person, doesn't ask questions, doesn't make demands. Just is." "Is that why you never married?" Beatrice asked, then immediately regretted her boldness. "I'm sorry, that's none of my business." "No, it's a fair question." Daniel stared into the fire. "There were a few young women in town who made their interest known, but after what I'd seen, what I'd done in the war, I didn't think I had the right to bring that darkness into someone else's life." "And now?" Beatrice asked, her heart beating faster. Daniel's eyes met hers. "Now I'm beginning to wonder if I was wrong, if maybe 2 people who understand darkness might find light together." The words hung between them, full of possibility. Beatrice set down her teacup with shaking hands. "It's late," she said. "We should both get some rest." Daniel nodded, accepting her retreat. "Good night, Beatrice." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice followed her into dreams that were surprisingly peaceful. The Christmas season brought new energy to the ranch. Emma threw herself into decorations with enthusiasm, enlisting Beatrice's help to make paper chains and string popcorn for the small fir tree Daniel brought in from the hills. They baked gingerbread and prepared packages for the ranch hands, wrapping small practical gifts in brown paper tied with red ribbon. "What should we get for Daniel?" Emma asked one afternoon as they worked on their Christmas preparations while Daniel was in town for supplies. "What does he need?" Beatrice countered. Emma rolled her eyes. "Daniel never says he needs anything. That's what makes him so difficult to buy for." Beatrice considered this. In the months she had known Daniel Jameson, she had never once heard him express a personal want or need. Everything he did was for the ranch, for Emma, for others. "Perhaps something he wouldn't buy for himself," she suggested, "something just for pleasure." Emma's face lit up. "I know. He used to play chess with Pa, but the set was lost in a flood years ago. He mentioned once that he missed it." "That's perfect," Beatrice agreed. "Do you think Mr. Peterson could make a simple set?" "I've seen his woodworking. It's quite fine." "I'll ask him tomorrow," Emma promised. "What about you? What will you give Daniel?" Beatrice felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "I've been embroidering handkerchiefs," she said evasively. "Handkerchiefs?" Emma laughed. "That's so practical. Daniel needs something special from you." "And what might that be?" Beatrice asked, bemused by the girl's certainty. Emma leaned close, her eyes twinkling. "He looks at you, you know, when you're not watching, the way Pa used to look at Ma." "Emma!" Beatrice exclaimed, her cheeks burning. "That's not appropriate." "It's true, though," Emma insisted. "And you look at him, too, when you think no one notices." Before Beatrice could formulate a response, they heard the sound of the wagon returning. Emma grinned and gathered up their crafts. "Just think about it," she said, scampering from the room. Left alone, Beatrice did think about it, about the way Daniel's rare smiles made her heart flutter, about how his steady presence had become essential to her sense of safety, about the growing awareness between them that neither had yet acknowledged aloud. When Daniel came in, stamping snow from his boots, his face was unusually grim. "What's wrong?" Beatrice asked, immediately sensing his tension. "News from town," he said, pulling a wanted poster from his coat. "Marshall thinks they've identified one of the men who attacked your stagecoach. He was spotted in Helena last week." Beatrice took the paper with trembling hands. The crude sketch showed a hard-faced man with a distinctive scar across his chin. The description matched one of the robbers she remembered. "They're sending a posse after him," Daniel continued. "Wanted to know if you'd be willing to identify him if they bring him in." Beatrice sank into a chair, the paper crumpling in her grip. The thought of facing one of her attackers, of revisiting that day, made her physically ill. "You don't have to decide now," Daniel said gently, kneeling beside her chair. "And you don't have to do it at all if you don't want to." "What if they catch him and I can't? What if I'm not brave enough?" she whispered. Daniel's hand covered hers, warm and calloused. "Beatrice, listen to me. Bravery isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what needs to be done despite the fear." "Like you did at Shiloh?" she asked. A shadow crossed his face. "At Shiloh, I was terrified every minute. We all were. But we stood our ground because our friends were beside us, because we couldn't let them down." His fingers tightened on hers. "You won't be alone if you have to face this man. I promise you that." The certainty in his voice steadied her. "Thank you," she said. "I'll think about it." Daniel nodded, then hesitated. "There's something else. I got a letter from Mrs. Whitman in town. She runs the school board. They're looking for a teacher starting after the new year." He met her eyes directly. "I mentioned your qualifications to her." "You did what?" Beatrice pulled her hand away. "Without consulting me." "I wanted to give you options," Daniel said. "Your contract with us for Emma's education runs through spring, but if you wanted to take the town position—" "So you're trying to be rid of me," Beatrice interrupted, irrational hurt flooding through her. "Is my presence here becoming inconvenient?" Daniel stood, his expression shuddering. "That's not it at all. I thought you might want more independence, a place of your own again. I was trying to help." "I don't need your help finding employment elsewhere," Beatrice snapped. "I've managed on my own before, and I can do so again when our arrangement ends." "Fine," Daniel said, his voice cooling. "I won't interfere again." He left the room, and Beatrice immediately regretted her outburst. Why had she reacted so strongly? The truth, she realized with a sinking heart, was that she didn't want to leave. The Triple J didn't want to leave him. The prospect had revealed feelings she'd been trying to ignore. Christmas Eve arrived in a swirl of snow, transforming the ranch into a winter wonderland. Despite the tension lingering between them, Daniel insisted on maintaining traditions for Emma's sake. They attended the small church service in town, then returned home for a special supper. Mrs. Peterson had prepared before leaving to spend the holiday with her own family. After the meal, they exchanged gifts by the fire. Emma was delighted with the new books Beatrice had ordered from back east, and the leather riding gloves Daniel gave her a gentle encouragement toward eventually returning to horseback. Daniel received the chess set from Emma with genuine pleasure, immediately setting it up and challenging his sister to a game while Beatrice watched, her own gift for him still hidden in her pocket. "And for you," Daniel said, handing Beatrice a small wooden box when their game was finished, "from both of us." Inside was a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. When she opened it, she found a tiny pressed wildflower, the same kind that had been in the first bouquet he'd left for her. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you both." "Daniel picked the flower special," Emma said, ignoring her brother's warning look. "Said it reminded him of you, pretty but tough enough to survive the Montana winters." Beatrice looked up at Daniel, who seemed uncharacteristically flustered. "Would you help me put it on?" she asked softly. He moved behind her chair, his fingers brushing the nape of her neck as he fastened the clasp. The brief contact sent shivers down her spine. "I have something for you as well," she said when he returned to his seat. She handed him a small package wrapped in tissue paper. Inside was not just the embroidered handkerchief she'd mentioned to Emma, but also a small leather-bound journal. Daniel opened it, finding the first several pages filled with her neat handwriting. "They're stories," she explained. "Folk tales my grandmother told me, about courage and perseverance. I thought perhaps you might read them to Emma sometimes, or enjoy them yourself." Daniel ran his fingers over the pages, clearly moved by the personal nature of the gift. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough. "This means more than you know." Later, when Emma had gone to bed, Beatrice lingered by the Christmas tree, admiring the way the candles cast a gentle glow over the simple decorations. She heard Daniel approach, felt his presence beside her. "I owe you an apology," she said without turning. "I overreacted about the teaching position." "No, I should have spoken to you first," Daniel countered. "It was presumptuous." Beatrice turned to face him. Why did you really do it? Tell me the truth." Daniel was silent for a long moment, the candlelight casting shadows across his features. "Because I'm afraid of what I'm beginning to feel for you," he finally said, "and I wanted to give you an escape before I did something foolish like ask you to stay forever." Beatrice's heart stuttered. "And what if I don't want an escape?" "Beatrice," he said her name like a prayer, "you deserve so much more than a broken-down cowboy with too many responsibilities and too much past. And you deserve more than a woman who'll never walk properly again, who wakes up screaming from nightmares, who can't even climb on a horse without help," she countered. Daniel shook his head. "Don't you see? Your injury doesn't define you, not to me. And your past doesn't define you," Beatrice said softly. "Not to me." He moved closer, his hand coming up to touch her cheek. "They said you'd never be whole again," he murmured. "And you said I didn't have to be," Beatrice finished. "You were right. None of us is whole, Daniel. We're all just doing our best with what we have left." His kiss was gentle at first, questioning, but when her arms came up around his neck, he deepened it, drawing her against him as if she were the most precious thing in the world. When they finally parted, both breathless, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "Merry Christmas, Beatrice," he whispered. "Merry Christmas, Daniel," she replied, feeling truly happy for the first time in longer than she could remember. January brought bitter cold, and the news that the man believed to be part of the gang that attacked Beatrice's stagecoach had been captured near Helena. The marshal sent word that they would bring him to Silver Creek for a hearing once the weather cleared enough for travel. The prospect cast a shadow over Beatrice's growing happiness. Though her relationship with Daniel had blossomed in the weeks since Christmas stolen kisses by the fire, long conversations after Emma was asleep, a deepening intimacy of both heart and mind, the thought of confronting her attacker filled her with dread. "I'm afraid," she admitted to Daniel one night as they sat together in the parlor. "What if I can't identify him? What if I freeze up? Or worse, what if I identify him and they let him go anyway?" Daniel took her hands in his. "Whatever happens, you'll have done your part. Justice isn't always perfect out here, but it's something." "Will you come with me?" she asked. "To the hearing?" "Try to stop me," he said, his voice fierce with protective devotion. When the day finally came in early February, Daniel drove Beatrice into town in the sleigh, Emma insisting on accompanying them for moral support. The courthouse was crowded. A notorious outlaw's hearing was the most excitement Silver Creek had seen in months. Beatrice sat stiffly in the front row, Daniel on one side, Emma on the other. When they brought the prisoner in, chains rattling, she forced herself to look at his face. The scar on his chin was unmistakable, but it was his eyes that triggered her memory cold, calculating eyes that had watched without emotion as her brother fell. "That's him," she whispered to Daniel, "the one who shot Robert." Daniel's hand tightened on hers as the proceedings began. The marshal presented the evidence against the man James "Scarface" Miller, including Beatrice's previous description that matched him exactly. When called to testify, Beatrice rose shakily, leaning on her cane. She felt the room's eyes upon her as she made her way to the witness stand, felt the prisoner's gaze burning into her. But when she spoke, her voice was steady, her recollection clear and precise. She described the robbery, her brother's murder, her own injury, and identified Miller without hesitation. "He's the man who shot my brother in cold blood," she concluded. "I will never forget his face." Miller's lawyer, a slick-talking man from Helena, tried to shake her testimony on cross-examination. "Miss Grayson, you were undoubtedly in a state of extreme distress during this incident. Is it possible you might be mistaken?" "I am not mistaken," Beatrice said firmly. "When someone murders your brother before your eyes and leaves you to die, their face tends to stay with you." A murmur of approval ran through the courtroom. When she returned to her seat, Daniel squeezed her hand, his eyes filled with pride. The judge found sufficient evidence to hold Miller for trial, setting a date for spring when a circuit judge would arrive. As the prisoner was led away, he turned suddenly toward Beatrice, his face contorted with hate. "You'll regret this, lady," he spat. "My friends are still out there. They don't forget." The marshal quickly hustled him out, but his words left a chill in the room. Outside the courthouse, Daniel was grim. "You'll stay at the ranch until after the trial," he said. "It's safer there." "You don't think his friends would really come after me?" Beatrice asked. "Probably not," Daniel admitted, "but I'm not taking chances with your safety." As they drove back to the ranch, Beatrice was quiet, processing the day's events. She had faced one of her demons and stood her ground. The fear wasn't gone, but it no longer controlled her. "You were so brave," Emma said, squeezing her arm, "like a heroine in a novel." Beatrice smiled at the girl. "I don't feel very heroic, but I did what needed to be done." "That's what courage is," Daniel said, echoing his earlier words, "and I'm proud of you." Back at the ranch, life settled into its winter rhythm again. Emma's education continued, with Beatrice introducing more advanced topics as the girls' knowledge grew. In the evenings, Daniel began teaching them both to play chess, his patience as he explained strategies revealing yet another facet of this complex man Beatrice was coming to love. One night in late February, as a blizzard raged outside, Daniel built up the fire in Beatrice's room before saying goodnight. "Stay," she said impulsively as he turned to leave, "just to talk. The storm is making me restless." Daniel hesitated, then nodded. He sat in the chair by the fire, while Beatrice perched on the edge of her bed. "Tell me about Shiloh," she asked, "if you can." Daniel stared into the flames for a long time before speaking. "I was 23, had joined up with a Montana volunteer regiment. We were so green, thought we'd have the rebellion put down in a few months." He shook his head. "Shiloh changed that. He described the battle in sparse, painful detail, the confusion, the noise, the horror of watching friends cut down beside him, how he had been shot in the shoulder but kept fighting, how his best friend had died in his arms, how the nightmares still came sometimes. When I finally came home, I couldn't talk about it, not to Pa, not to Emma, just kept it all bottled up inside." He met Beatrice's eyes. "Until you." "Why me?" she asked softly. "Because you understand loss. You don't flinch from the hard truths." He moved from the chair to sit beside her on the bed, taking her hands in his. "Because when I'm with you, I feel like maybe the broken parts of me don't matter so much." Beatrice reached up to touch his face. "They don't," she whispered. "Your scars, visible and invisible, are part of what makes you the man you are. The man I've come to love." Daniel's breath caught. "Say that again." "I love you," Beatrice said, the words both frightening and liberating. "With all that I am, broken leg and all." "Beatrice," he breathed, pulling her into his arms, "I love you too, more than I thought possible." His kiss was hungry, desperate, and she returned it with equal fervor, months of restrained emotion finally breaking free. When they separated, both breathing hard, Daniel pressed his forehead to hers. "Marry me," he said, "not out of obligation or practicality, but because I can't imagine life without you now." Beatrice laughed through sudden tears. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." The blizzard continued through the night, but within the walls of the Triple J, a new warmth had taken hold, the warmth of two souls who had found in each other not completion, but acceptance, not perfection, but love. The news of their engagement was met with Emma's delighted squeals and Mrs. Peterson's knowing smile. "About time," the housekeeper said, patting Daniel's cheek as if he were still a boy. "Your mama would approve, God rest her soul." They set the wedding date for April, after the spring thaw, but before the busiest ranch work began. There was much to do, a dress to make, invitations to send, preparations for the small reception they planned to hold at the ranch. Through it all, Beatrice found herself happier than she had ever been, despite the lingering shadow of Miller's trial scheduled for early May. She and Daniel agreed not to let it overshadow their wedding or future plans. March brought the first hints of spring, patches of bare ground appearing through melting snow, the return of meadowlarks and longer days filled with sunshine. As the weather improved, Beatrice extended her daily walks, strengthening her injured leg. Though she would always need the cane, she found she could manage longer distances without as much pain. One afternoon, she made her way to the corral where Daniel was working with the horses. She watched him for a while, admiring the easy way he moved, the gentle authority he commanded. "Teach me to ride again," she said when he noticed her. Daniel's eyebrows shot up. "Are you sure? With your leg?" "I'm sure," Beatrice interrupted. "I can't let fear dictate what I can and cannot do." "Isn't that what you've been telling Emma?" Daniel grinned, pride evident in his expression. "Let me finish here, and we'll start today. I've got the perfect horse for you." The perfect horse turned out to be a gentle mare named Sadie, with a smooth gait and a patient disposition. Daniel helped Beatrice mount, showing her how to adjust her weight to accommodate her weaker leg. "We'll go slow," he promised, "just around the corral today." The sensation of being on horseback again after so long was both terrifying and exhilarating. Beatrice's injured leg protested at first, but as she relaxed into the rhythm of the horse's movement, she found a position that was almost comfortable. "You're a natural," Daniel encouraged as she completed a circuit of the corral. "How does it feel?" "Wonderful," Beatrice admitted, "like freedom." They practiced every afternoon when weather permitted, and soon Beatrice was able to ride out into the meadow, feeling the spring breeze on her face as Sadie carried her farther from the ranch buildings than she'd been able to venture on foot. "I never thought I'd do this again," she told Daniel as they rode side by side one particularly beautiful afternoon. "I had resigned myself to limitations. The only real limitations are the ones we place on ourselves," Daniel said. "My father taught me that. He lost an arm in the Mexican War, but still built this ranch from nothing." Beatrice looked at him in surprise. "You never mentioned that." Daniel shrugged. "It wasn't important to who he was, just like your leg isn't important to who you are." Beatrice leaned over to kiss him, nearly losing her balance in the process. Daniel steadied her with a laugh. "Careful there, or we'll both end up in the mud." As they rode back to the ranch, Beatrice spotted Emma waiting on the porch, waving frantically. "Something's wrong," Daniel said, urging his horse forward. Emma ran to meet them. "Marshall's here," she said breathlessly. "Says there's trouble." In the house they found Marshall Jenkins pacing the parlor, hat in hand. Miller escaped, he said without preamble when they entered. Killed a deputy in the process. He had helped 2 riders broke him out during a transfer to a more secure jail in Helena. Beatrice sank into a chair, Daniel's hand immediately finding her shoulder. "Any idea where they're headed?" he asked the marshal. "Last seen riding north," Jenkins replied. "But one of Miller's known associates was spotted in these parts yesterday. I'm concerned they might come after Miss Grayson." Daniel's grip tightened. "I want a shotgun rider on the stagecoach anytime Beatrice travels to town, and I'll assign one of my men to stay at the house whenever I'm out working the range." "Already arranged for the shotgun rider," Jenkins nodded. "But Miss Grayson might consider postponing the wedding. Drawing a crowd right now might not be wise." "No," Beatrice said firmly. "I won't let Miller dictate how we live our lives. The wedding goes forward as planned." Daniel crouched beside her chair. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," she said. "I'm through letting fear make my decisions." After the marshal left, promising to keep them informed of any developments, Daniel sent one of the ranch hands to town to inform the minister and guests that the wedding would proceed as scheduled. He then gathered his most trusted men, explaining the situation and setting up a rotation of guards for the house and property. "I won't take chances with your safety," he told Beatrice that night, "not with Miller and his gang out there." "I know," she said, "but we can't live in fear forever, Daniel." "Not forever," he agreed, "just until they catch the bastards or put them in the ground." The following weeks passed in a state of heightened vigilance. Beatrice continued her daily activities, teaching Emma, preparing for the wedding, practicing her riding, but always with the knowledge that danger might be lurking just beyond the horizon. Daniel rarely left the immediate vicinity of the ranch, delegating more distant tasks to his men, who always traveled in pairs. Despite the circumstances, April 15th dawned clear and beautiful, a perfect day for a wedding. Beatrice stood at her bedroom window, watching as ranch hands and neighbors arrived, setting up tables in the yard under Emma and Mrs. Peterson's direction. The preparations had taken on a festive air, with wildflowers decorating every surface and a small band tuning up near the makeshift dance floor. A knock at the door revealed Emma, already dressed in a new blue gown, her honey-colored hair elaborately braided with flowers. "Are you ready?" she asked excitedly. "Mrs. Peterson sent me to help with your hair." Beatrice smiled. "I'm ready." With Emma's help, she dressed in the simple but elegant ivory gown they had worked on together, adorned with lace from Beatrice's mother's wedding dress. Emma arranged her dark hair in a crown of braids, weaving in small white flowers and a lace veil. "You look beautiful," Emma said when they finished, tears in her eyes, "like a princess in a fairy tale." Beatrice hugged the girl who had become like a sister to her. "Thank you, Emma, for everything." "You're family now," Emma said simply, "or you will be in about an hour." A second knock announced Mrs. Peterson, who entered with a small bouquet of wildflowers tied with white ribbon. "These are from Daniel," she said, handing them to Beatrice. "And he asked me to give you this." She handed over a small package containing a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a tiny silver horse. "For courage," the accompanying note read, "though you've already shown more than enough." Beatrice slipped the bracelet on, touching it for reassurance as she prepared to make her way downstairs. The house had been cleared of guests, who were gathered in the yard where the minister waited with Daniel. Marshal Jenkins had posted men around the perimeter of the property, just in case, but the day had progressed peacefully so far. Emma helped Beatrice navigate the stairs, then left to take her place in the ceremony. Mrs. Peterson gave Beatrice a final hug before following. Alone in the hallway, Beatrice took a deep breath, steadying herself on her cane. She wished fleetingly that her father or brother could be here to walk her down the aisle, but pushed the thought away. Today was about beginnings, not endings. The ranch hand stationed by the door opened it for her, revealing the yard transformed by spring flowers and the faces of friends and neighbors. At the far end, beneath an arch of blooming branches, stood Daniel. More handsome than she had ever seen him in a new black suit, his hair neatly trimmed, his face solemn until he caught sight of her. The smile that broke across his features was like sunrise after the longest night. Beatrice began her slow walk toward him, conscious of her limp but no longer ashamed of it. Each step brought her closer to the future she had never dared to imagine after the accident. Daniel met her halfway, offering his arm for the final steps. Together, they approached the minister, a united front facing whatever life might bring. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They exchanged vows and rings, plain gold bands that Daniel had ordered from Helena. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Daniel's kiss was both tender and passionate, a promise of the night to come. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing, feasting and toasting. Beatrice danced with her new husband despite her leg, finding that with his strong support, she could manage several turns around the floor before needing to rest. As sunset painted the sky in spectacular hues of pink and gold, Daniel led her away from the festivities to a quiet spot by the pond. "Happy?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Beatrice replied, leaning into his embrace. "I have a wedding gift for you," Daniel said, "but it's not quite ready yet." "What is it?" she asked, intrigued. "I've hired a doctor from Helena, a specialist in bone injuries. He's developed new treatments that might help with your leg. Not a cure," he added quickly, "but perhaps less pain, more mobility." Beatrice turned in his arms, tears springing to her eyes. "Daniel, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll try," he said, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Not because you need to be fixed, you don't, but because you deserve every chance at comfort, at doing the things you love without pain." "I'll try," she promised, "for both of us." They returned to the celebration hand in hand, only to find Emma rushing toward them, her face pale. "Daniel, riders coming fast from the north, 3 of them. Pete says they're armed." Daniel immediately shifted to action, pulling Beatrice toward the house. "Get inside, both of you. Tell Jenkins and my men." "What about you?" Beatrice asked, fear clutching at her heart. "I'll be right behind you. Go." Beatrice hurried toward the house with Emma, their movement drawing attention from the guests. The marshal appeared at their side, quickly assessing the situation. "Get everyone inside or behind cover," he ordered one of his deputies. Mrs. Jameson, stay in the center of the house, away from windows." From inside they heard shouts, then the distinctive crack of gunfire. Beatrice clutched Emma's hand, her wedding day dissolving into nightmare. Through the window, she caught glimpses of men taking cover, of guests scattering, of Daniel with a rifle, directing his ranch hands. More shots rang out, followed by the thunder of hooves. A man's voice, unfamiliar and harsh, called out over the chaos. "Send out the woman who testified. Send her out or we burn this place to the ground." Beatrice felt the blood drain from her face. Miller. He had come for her, just as he'd threatened. "Stay here," she told Emma, moving toward the door. "Beatrice, no." Emma grabbed her arm. "You can't go out there." I won't let anyone else die because of me, Beatrice said, gently but firmly removing the girl's hand. Find Mrs. Peterson and stay in the root cellar until this is over. Before Emma could protest further, Beatrice opened the door and stepped onto the porch, her white wedding dress making her an immediate target. She left her cane behind, forcing herself to stand straight despite the pain. I'm Beatrice Jameson, she called out, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent yard. The woman who testified. 3 riders had positioned themselves just beyond the ranch buildings, partially sheltered by trees. One of them, Miller, laughed harshly. Well, well, the crippled lady's got spine after all. What do you want? Beatrice demanded. Justice, Miller spat. Your lies got me arrested, nearly hanged. They weren't lies, Beatrice replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. You murdered my brother, shot me and left me for dead. If that's not deserving of hanging, what is? Miller raised his rifle. Reckon we'll find out if you die any better than your brother did. Before he could pull the trigger, another shot rang out from the side of the house. Miller jerked, his rifle discharging harmlessly into the air. He toppled from his horse, clutching his chest. Chaos erupted again, the remaining outlaws returning fire, the marshal and ranch hands shooting back. Beatrice stood frozen on the porch until strong arms yanked her backward into the house. Are you trying to get yourself killed? Daniel demanded, his face white with fear and rage. What were you thinking? I was thinking I couldn't bear it if anyone else died protecting me, Beatrice said, her composure finally breaking. I couldn't bear it if I lost you. Daniel pulled her fiercely against him, and I can't bear life without you, so don't you ever do something like that again. Outside, the gunfire had ceased. The marshal's voice called the all clear, and Daniel released Beatrice reluctantly to check the situation. He returned minutes later. Miller's dead. One of his men is wounded and captured. The third escaped. No one on our side was seriously hurt. Pete took a graze to the arm, that's all. Relief washed over Beatrice in a dizzying wave. It's over then. It's over, Daniel confirmed, gathering her close again. And we have a wedding to finish celebrating. The guests gradually returned, shaken but determined not to let the incident ruin the day. The band struck up music again, and Daniel led Beatrice in another dance, this one slow and intimate. Not exactly the wedding day I planned for you, he murmured against her hair. It's perfect, Beatrice insisted, because I'm here with you, and we're both alive, and we have the rest of our lives ahead of us. As night fell, lanterns were lit around the yard, casting a warm glow over the festivities. One by one, the guests departed with good wishes for the newlyweds, until only family remained. Emma hugged them both before retiring, leaving Daniel and Beatrice alone at last. Shall we? Daniel asked, offering his arm to escort her upstairs to the master bedroom that would now be theirs. The room had been prepared for them, fresh linens on the bed, wildflowers in a vase by the window, a fire burning low in the grate. Daniel closed the door behind them, suddenly shy despite the months of growing intimacy between them. You're beautiful, he said, reaching to remove the flowers from her hair. I still can't believe you're my wife. Believe it, Beatrice smiled, stepping into his arms. I'm not going anywhere. Their first night together as husband and wife was a revelation, tender and passionate, filled with discoveries and whispered promises. In Daniel's arms, Beatrice found not just pleasure but acceptance so complete it brought tears to her eyes. What's wrong? He asked, brushing them away. Nothing, she assured him. I'm just happy. Completely, wholly happy. Daniel smiled, understanding her choice of words. You know, the doctors were wrong about you, he said, tracing the line of her cheek. You are whole, Beatrice, more whole than anyone I've ever known. In the quiet aftermath of their lovemaking, as Daniel slept beside her, Beatrice reflected on the journey that had brought her here from the worst day of her life to the best, from despair to joy, from brokenness to a different kind of wholeness. She had lost much, but gained more, had been damaged, but not defeated. The road ahead would have its challenges, her leg would always pain her. Daniel's memories of war would never completely fade, and building a life together would require work and compromise. But lying there in the darkness, listening to her husband's steady breathing, Beatrice felt a sense of peace she had never thought to find again. They had both been right. She realized the doctors who said she'd never be whole again, and Daniel who said she didn't have to be. Her life had been irreparably changed by a single bullet, but that change had eventually led her here, to this man, this home, this love. Perhaps being broken was simply the first step toward becoming something new, something stronger, more resilient, more compassionate than before. As dawn approached, Beatrice finally drifted to sleep, Daniel's arms secure around her waist, his warmth a promise that whatever came next, they would face it together. 5 years later, the sound of children's laughter drifted through the open window of the Triple J ranch house, drawing Beatrice's attention from the essay she was grading. She set down her pen and moved to look outside, a smile spreading across her face at the sight that greeted her. Daniel was in the yard with their 3-year-old son, Robert, teaching him to throw a lasso around a fence post. The boy's attempts sent the rope in wild directions, causing Daniel to duck and laugh. Nearby, Emma, now 20 and engaged to the blacksmith's son, was helping 2-year-old Catherine pick wildflowers, the little girl's dark curls a mirror image of Beatrice's own. Beatrice reached for her cane, a beautiful carved piece that had been a gift from Daniel on their 3rd anniversary, and made her way outside. Her leg still troubled her, especially in cold weather or when she was tired, but the specialist Daniel had found had indeed helped reduce her pain and improve her mobility. "Mama," Robert spotted her first, abandoning his rope to run to her. "Papa's teaching me to be a cowboy." "I see that," Beatrice smiled, ruffling his blonde hair so like his father's. "And you're doing very well." Daniel approached, scooping Catherine up as he passed Emma. The little girl immediately reached for Beatrice, who balanced carefully on her cane to accept her daughter's weight on her hip. "How are the essays?" Daniel asked, dropping a kiss on his wife's cheek. "Promising," Beatrice replied. "I think several of my students have real talent." After their marriage, Beatrice had indeed taken the teaching position in Silver Creek, riding to town 3 days a week while continuing Emma's education at home. When the children came along, she had reduced her schedule, but continued to teach advanced students who showed particular aptitude. The arrangement allowed her to pursue her passion while still having ample time with her family. "Mr. Peterson finished the new cradle," Emma announced, gathering up her flower bouquet. "It's beautiful, all carved with leaves and vines." Beatrice's free hand went to her slightly rounded belly. Their 3rd child wasn't expected until winter, but preparations had already begun. "He's too generous," she said. "We must have him for supper next week to thank him properly." "Already invited him," Daniel said with a grin. "Along with half the town, seems like. Emma's been busy with the invitations." "It's not half the town," Emma protested. "Just the closest neighbors and friends. 20, maybe 25 people at most." "For our anniversary," Beatrice realized. "Emma, you shouldn't have gone to so much trouble." 5 years is worth celebrating, Emma insisted, especially given how the wedding turned out. Daniel laughed. You have to admit no one's likely to forget that day. Certainly not Miller, Emma said with grim satisfaction. The outlaw's demise had become something of a legend in Silver Creek, embellished with each retelling until Beatrice hardly recognized the events. Speaking of celebrations, Daniel said, changing the subject, Sadie's got a surprise for you in the stable. Sadie? Beatrice asked, puzzled. The gentle mare that had been her first mount after the injury had grown too old for riding and was now kept as a pet. Come see, Daniel urged, taking Catherine from her arms. Robert, you and Emma keep an eye on your sister for a few minutes. Daniel walked beside Beatrice to the stable, shortening his stride to match hers. Inside, in Sadie's stall, they found the old mare standing protectively over a wobbly-legged foal. Oh, Beatrice exclaimed, she had her baby. But I thought that she was too old, Daniel finished. So did I. But Pete found them like this morning, both healthy as can be. The foal, a delicate buckskin with a white blaze, eyed them curiously before nuzzling back against its mother. She's beautiful, Beatrice said softly, reaching over the stall door to stroke Sadie's nose. What a miracle. I thought we might give the foal to Robert when she's trained, Daniel suggested. Start him young, like you wanted for our children. Beatrice smiled, remembering their conversations before the children were born, how she had insisted they learn to ride as soon as they could walk, determined they would never know the fear that had kept Emma from the saddle for so long. He'll be thrilled, she agreed, though we should wait to tell him. He's not known for patience. Wonder where he gets that from, Daniel teased, pulling her close. Certainly not his father, the most patient man in Montana territory, Beatrice replied, leaning into his embrace. Daniel chuckled, the sound reverberating through her. Only with you, Bea. Only with you. They stood together in the peaceful quiet of the stable, watching the new mother and foal. Life at the Triple J hadn't always been easy. There had been droughts and blizzards, cattle illness and market downturns, not to mention the challenges of parenthood and Beatrice's continuing struggles with her injury. But through it all, they had faced each obstacle together, their love deepening with every passing season. Do you ever regret it? Beatrice asked suddenly, taking in a broken schoolteacher all those years ago. Daniel turned her to face him, his expression serious. Never. Not for a single moment. His hand came up to cup her cheek. You brought life back to this place, Beatrice, to Emma, to me. There's not a day goes by that I don't thank God for whatever twist of fate brought you here. Even the bad parts, she asked, the nightmares, the pain, the days when I can hardly walk. All of it, he said firmly, because it's all part of you, and I love all of you. He kissed her gently. Besides, who said any of us gets through this life unscathed? We all carry scars. Yours are just more visible than most. Daniel Jameson, Beatrice said, her voice thick with emotion. How did I ever deserve you? He smiled, the same smile that had first begun to heal her heart on their wedding day. You didn't have to deserve me, Bea. That's what love is. It's not earned or owed. It just is. As they walked back to the house, arm in arm, Beatrice reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the terrible moment that had nearly ended her life to this quiet afternoon with her family, every step painful and joyful alike had been necessary. Her leg would never fully heal, and the memory of her brother's murder would always bring sorrow. But here, with Daniel and their children, with the life they had built together, She had found something she had once thought impossible: contentment with who she was, scars and all. The doctors had been right in their way. She would never be whole again, not in the way they meant. But Daniel had been right too. She didn't have to be. None of them did. They only had to be brave enough to love and be loved, broken pieces and all. And that, Beatrice realized as she watched her children playing in the yard of the home that had saved her, was more than enough.